All right. We are recording. Cool. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for joining us this week. Eco Paso is proud to partner with National Drive Electric Week. And National Drive Electric Week is a dedicated week every year to the celebration and education on electric vehicles, right? For those that have purchased them and used them and love them, and car enthusiasts, to those that are just looking at the finance and economics of them, or what are the features and the power that they could offer, and then all the options, right? I think everyone just hears Tesla all the time, but it really shows you the wide range of options that are all great. Um, so Eco Paso is, we're a 501c3 all volunteer nonprofit. And so we thought this was just a great way to educate the public in El Paso, try to get more adoption of electric vehicles in El Paso, and really just to, help, anyone that's just interested to talk to actual electric vehicle owners, right? People that have actually lived it, done it, drive one every day, and can really give you their personal advice on what they've experienced. So that's what this session is going to be all week through Sunday. But we have a guest today, very special guest. Thank you to Jonathan Macias. He is one of our local board members here in El Paso for Eco El Paso. And I will let him sort of take it away, since he is probably one of our local expert EV owners and users.
Thank you, Shelby. I should caution that I am a self-proclaimed expert. I do not necessarily have a background in engineering or anything of that nature, but nobody that drives an EV or an electric vehicle really has to have that level of degree either. These vehicles are obtainable and accessible for the everyday driver, and that's really what we aim to do in terms of our outreach through the newly formed Rio Grande Electric Auto Association chapter, or as I lovingly refer to as the RGEAA. The chapter was recently created, and it links up to the national chapter of the Electric Auto Association, which has actually been around since the 1970s. And we endeavor to do the same amount of outreach and education, as well as providing community cohesion for those that have similar interests in and affinities, whether that be entities like the Sierra Club, our local energy provider, and even those that are interested in how do you get some of those renewable energies into these EVs or even the partial hybrid electric vehicles, which we can also talk a little bit about today. I'd like to first share, Shelby, and for those of you that are watching this on this live stream, my fascination and how I got interested with EVs. My first introduction to electric vehicles was a result of seeing a grant that had come through when I used to work at the University of Texas at El Paso. It was about, I believe, 10 years ago, where a forward-thinking faculty member had the idea and the initiative to think about how we provide the infrastructure or the charging stations, which for EVs is the equivalent of a gas station pump, and how to strategically place them throughout our community. What that faculty member ended up doing was writing a grant in coordination with the City of El Paso, the state, other entities like HACEP, as well as I think there were some federal entities, in order to develop that distribution network in our community. And what I would say was very forward thinking to about 10 years ago, before EV started gaining popularity in our community. When I was reviewing the outcomes of that grant, I noticed that there was about 27 charging networks that were a level 2. And level 2 just means that it's able to provide about the equivalent of what an electric dryer does in most home settings, for those of us that have those, or sometimes even the electric ranges or cooktop surfaces. So it's very much similar to that output. And those were strategically placed throughout our community, so that people that are living in apartment communities, like the Green Living Community as part of HACEP, or even for those students, staff, and faculty members that work at UTEP, are able to go and connect their electric vehicles throughout the day to get a charge. There's also been a increased awareness to place these in places where people frequent, whether they're going out for dinner or whenever they're making errands or running to get groceries, as we've seen most recently with some of our grocery stores that have placed these charging infrastructure or options right in front of their places. So anyways, I first learned about it, and I just thought that it was a very powerful demonstration in their community about placing that infrastructure. And then I started thinking about, well, when could I start taking benefit of that network that's out there, and how would I even do it, and what does it mean to be an EV driver, and what are some of my options? At that time, I tend to consider myself an early adopter, and so I look at this from the perspective of technology seems to advance at a curve that's very similar for computers as well as what we're seeing in the EV industry, which means that about every 3 to 5 years, you're getting enhancements in range and in options. But then we're also seeing the battery technology is allowing for the prices to come down. The batteries that are embedded in those electric vehicles are very similar to what we're seeing on our modern day smartphones. The higher end batteries tend to be what it's called a lithium ion technology, which means a more energy for the size of the pack, but also longevity. And from that perspective, my first EV was actually a Nissan Leaf that I ended up leasing. And Shelby, if you don't mind, yes, you've got that one up on the screen. I'd also like to share my screen real quick, and I'll just share with the folks out there that there were other ones that specific to our community, which was a Nissan Leaf that was readily available in our community and even had backing by the local dealership in order to provide maintenance and the necessary operation to keep it running. So it looks like right now I can't quite screen share, but when I do get to that point to share some of my items, the thing about the Nissan Leaf is that it is now in its third generation. And under its third generation, it actually has the availability to go up to 226 miles. The first generation of the Nissan Leaf had about 80 to 100 miles of range, but it really depended, just like miles per gallon on a traditional internal combustion engine or one that is dependent on gas or diesel. It depends on the driver's temperament for how quickly they like to accelerate, what the weather conditions are, if they're going up maybe a grade, or maybe like we have here in El Paso, up a mountain pass, where you might see an impact on the miles per gallon. And so the very same applies to electric vehicles, because it's all based on, it's all based on physics.
Yeah.
So I think what we see, Shelby, is that this is the options in terms of being able to look at what models suit our needs. Because for me, what I was really concerned about when I looked at my first EV is that if the technology was advancing that quickly, I didn't necessarily want to buy. Now, I wasn't really a big proponent of leasing vehicles prior to the Nissan Leaf. That was actually my first vehicle that I had leased, but it gave me a very low risk approach to being able to take advantage of the newest technology, but not necessarily be hampered or be stuck to it if something came out in 2 or 3 years later. Shelby, I know you've been considering EVs. Is the Nissan Leaf one that you've thought about?
It is, yeah. I actually went to Casa Nissan here in El Paso, and they actually sponsored last year's event, and they had a few on site, and they were really nice. It was actually this white, kind of light cream colored version, and I mean, when you looked on the inside, it looked like a 21st century, spaceship. All the technology, screens, it was really clean looking on the inside. I don't know, I just really liked it, and the mileage was great. I think the one they had on site at the time was one of their advanced, larger battery packs that had the advanced mileage on it. And I think the misconception is everyone just thinks Tesla, oh, they're $50,000 to $100,000, and that's really not the case, because when you start to dig in, yeah, you can buy a $50,000 to $100,000 EV, but you can also buy them much cheaper. And what you're also now starting to see is I'm starting to see used vehicles. So you're seeing used Nissan Leafs and used Teslas, even Model S and Model 3s. You'll find them used now, low mileage. Which
you bring up a really good point, Shelby, and I think that's the thing that we want to drive home. And this is also a good opportunity to talk a little bit about why we decided to establish the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association under Eco El Paso. We really see this as a method at Eco El Paso, for which I'm also a board member, under Eco El Paso, I should say, as an opportunity for us to talk about your mobility needs as a part of sustainability. Because if you really are thinking about EVs, then the next natural step might be, how do you power that EV? It might be through clean energy, such as solar panels, rooftop solar, or even community solar, in a way to ensure that what's getting into your vehicle is something that is sustainable and might not have as big of an impact on our local and global climate. But we can talk a little bit more about that as we continue to talk about my EV journey. But my favorite thing about the Nissan Leaf, which is really credited with starting the boom for interest and really the first mass-produced obtainable electric vehicle, is that now those generation 1 and 2 Nissan Leafs are really, really affordable, and some can be purchased for as low as $10,000 and below.
Oh,
and that's
wow.
just one of them.
That's nice.
Yeah. And the other thing that's important for consumers to know, or people in our community, is that the average amount of miles that somebody drives tends to be, and perhaps not in the middle of a pandemic, but it tends to be about 40 miles a day. So with the range of about 80 to 100 miles, depending on how you drive per day, it's more than enough for most people. And the other thing is, if you're fortunate enough to have ability to charge at home and at work, then you're always leaving either location with a full battery, or as some like to say, a full tank of, quote, gas, which is very similar to the consumer behavior that we've come to expect from when we get home at the end of the day and plug in our cell phone, and then we're good to go. So definitely consider talking to some of our friends over at Casa Nissan. They were instrumental in being a sponsor at last year's National Drive Electric event, as well as other solar companies that were there that can help you think about that whole ecosystem from mobility all the way to sustainability. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit more about, well, what happens when you're outside of your home or your workplace where you may or may not have charging? Well, we've done some of this legwork for you, and we will refer to some third-party partners that have already done the hard work of mapping. And the first resource I wanted to share is a website by the name of Plug Share, like the electrical plug. You'll see it up on the screen right now. Shelby, this might be something of interest for you and your family as you consider an EV, because it breaks down the available amount of chargers in the country and then specific to North America. And you can see that it is color coded. And as I hover over, you can see that we have chargers here in our community. Now, mine might be set for a very specific type of charger, just because I've been recently exploring what other options I have. But as I get closer to our community, you can see that you can filter it by the preferred method that you would have for whatever charger.
Oh, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're definitely everywhere. You'll notice that some of the ones that are color coded, I think the orange means that they're a higher capacity charger. Those higher capacity chargers really is what enabled people to take their vehicles on road trips and not have to worry as much about how they're going to charge when they get there, or if there's going to be available charging. Yeah. And some of these, they even interface with what's the instant status of the chargers. Right now, this one's hovering on the superchargers we have in El Paso.
That's super cool. See if there's a line, because I think that's what people ask, right? Well, if I am going to drive, how far can I get to the next station? It's almost like the gas stations are going to have to convert to electric chargers, or they're going to miss out on the action, because it seems like you find these chargers at like Rudy's Barbecue and random locations. Are they all at random spots, or have you found any gas stations starting to adopt this model?
So these are private chargers that are owned typically by the company or by the private entity where they're placed. Sometimes there's an agreement to allow the chargers to be somewhere where they anticipate that there will be a large amount of traffic, but they tend to be in places where people are going to naturally stop over, whether it's for a restroom break or for a lunch or a dinner break. And it allows you to take advantage of that natural momentary pause in order for you to get a little bit of a charge up. So they tend to be pretty well thought out and methodical where they're placed. I think one of the things that I've noticed on with my initial research is that there's fragmentation between the companies that are offering the charging. So all that means is that it's like a loyalty club. If you're going to want to charge with Tesla, well, those are very proprietary and they're only going to be for the Tesla network. But then there are others like at, let's say, here's one that's at a local university that I believe is part of a network that's known as the
Nice.
Blink, no, I'm sorry, not the Blink, the ChargePoint charging network. And
Gotcha.
so you would just need to make sure that you have the
Right at the
appropriate,
hospital.
yeah, and you just want to make sure that you have the appropriate key fob in order to be able to actuate or start that charging session.
Uh,
And the neat thing about these being private entities is that sometimes they consider this as part of the amenities that are provided to the visitors. So there might be no charge to stay there, or they might only charge you after an hour or after 2 hours. One of the other things I really wanted to highlight with regards to PlugShare is you'll notice here, this one is the Texas Tech Science Center over at the, looks like the Trans Mountain campus, which is in West El Paso. But all of the information is crowdsourced. So if anybody's scared about what we would call uptime or how reliable the charging stations are, you can see here that there are people out there that have actually tested or recently verified that they've been functional. And this is in addition to what ChargePoint would post on their network for the real-time availability. If you're new to El Paso or if you're just driving through, you can even see pictures that people have posted. So you can see exactly where or less you're going to find the charger.
yeah, I've noticed my last employer actually offered front row parking with EV chargers, or for anyone that drove a hybrid vehicle, sort of encouraging, the more people that drive those, the better the parking spot you get, which some companies may not matter, but if you've got thousands of employees pulling up every day, it's kind of nice no matter what time of day that you don't have to fight for parking. And it's even nicer if they're going to pay for your charging, because then we're not only talking about getting rid of gas, but now we're talking, half your charging costs could be, gone.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's a really good point. And the nice thing is that employers or private entities or even public entities that really want to help be part of the wave of the future and building out that infrastructure, it's nothing special like running a gas line or having to put underground containment, um, what is it, like tanks for fuel. Electricity by and large is already readily available, and it's just a matter of running the line. And they don't all have to invest in these level 2 chargers. Some of them can just dedicate the typical 120 outlets that your cell phone and your computer already use. And they can just say that these are designated areas where people that drive EVs are allowed to plug in. Now, I do want to underscore that just because the vehicle can connect to a traditional outlet doesn't mean that you don't have to think about additional things like making sure it's properly wired or that it is actually grounded, because a lot of the vehicles as well as the portable charging bricks will do a quick check to make sure these things are in place. But the other thing too is that it's just going to take longer to charge because you're not getting as much access to the electrical output as you would on some of these other charging stations. So that's just something to keep in mind. And that's one of the things that the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association wants to do in the years to come, is to work more with those private entities like maybe apartment complexes to be able to offer and develop a plan for how we roll out infrastructure in places where people might not have as much of a say as to, let's say, installing their own charger, but still having access so it's not one of the impediments to EV adoption.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great option. I'm sure people would take advantage of it if it existed. Nice.
Yeah, so I think for anybody, again, the website is going to be called PlugShare. And if you have some extra time, they have a mobile app as well. And it really helps you be able to plot out everywhere you want to go, as well as the options. The nice thing about PlugShare, because it is crowdsourced, there are actually friendly people in the community or any community that you search that are willing to share their actual charging station, sometimes at low to no cost, just because they realize that some of these are harder to find maybe in rural areas, or they're really helping to break down what's called range anxiety, which is being able to get somewhere but not know where you're going to charge once you get there.
Nice. That's a good point. So what would you say for your non-techie, right? Let's say I've got a brick phone. I'm not on the internet. I don't have an internet job. I don't play with apps all day. I mean, how difficult is it to pick up on all this, all the apps and the learning?
I would say that if you can check email you can be checking on some of these things as well. And if that's an impediment, then that's okay. We need to meet everybody where they are. And you can rely on those people in your home that are more tech savvy, because that shouldn't be a barrier to adopting the EV lifestyle either. The other thing is that the folks that are in our community, and I mentioned Casa Nissan earlier, but there are also Chevrolet dealerships that have committed to having the necessary technicians in order to be able to provide maintenance and information on vehicles like the Chevy Volt with a V, as well as the Chevy Bolt with a B as in boy, which is an all-electric
Nice.
vehicle that has about the same range as some of these more expensive Teslas, but then the entry price is not as much, and they're already on the used market. So those sometimes start as low as in the low 20s, or even maybe about $17,000, which is about the price of most cars at average cost in our region. The other thing, Shelby, that I think is a good point to keep in mind when it comes to barriers is that if you're not seeing what you need, or they don't have what you need on the lot at some of these local car dealerships, then reach out to Eco El Paso or to the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association and ask us, and we can put you in contact with people that may actually own the vehicle that you're interested in, and they can help share with you a little bit about their experience.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Nice. Yeah, that's great to hear, because you always hear about price being an issue, and you always hear, oh, it's going to be too technical or too advanced. And it sounds like they're almost kind of at price parity with gasoline vehicles. And it sounds like they're pretty easy to drive. Now, here's another thing that people probably don't know is electric vehicles are extremely fast. Now, they may not be 200-mile-per-hour Ferraris, but when it comes to going 0 to 30 and 0 to 60, I know personally, just being a passenger in them, I was shocked. Just even 5 or 10 years ago, the Chevy Volt, my friend had one, and he was on all electric mode, and it just took off. I was very surprised. Well, what did you think about your electric vehicle?
I was shocked as well. And the first time I drove an electric vehicle, which was the Nissan Leaf, I was worried for what it would mean for my insurance premiums, because it seemed unfathomable that you could get a vehicle that would go as fast as 0 to 60 or in about anywhere from 3 to 7 seconds, depending on which technology you're looking at or which model. And that's something that quickly becomes addictive. And as much as you're going to save in
Nice.
operation and maintenance costs, you might need to make sure that you budget for the replacement tires, since you might be
Yes.
running through those much quicker. But you're right. The basic idea here is that because of the way that electric motors work, you have all of the power right off of what they call the line, which means if you're from a dead stop, you can go right away and you have access to all of the potential power output that the vehicle can give you. And it's a little bit different than in a traditional gas engine, where it is sometimes changing through gears, or maybe it doesn't reach its optimal power output until it gets to a certain, what's known as an RPM. And I think this is a really good point. We at Eco El Paso and the Rio Grande Electric Auto Association are not in a position where we're telling people that there will not be a place for gasoline cars or vehicles. There will always be one. We're just trying to say that there are different options out there. And maybe the next logical step for some people in our community is to even start exploring things like hybrid technology, which is the complement of an electric motor with a traditional engine, but it favors the optimization so that you can get anywhere from 50 plus miles per gallon instead of the average 30 miles or less with some of the other technology. One of the things that I've heard other people mention when it comes to potential EV or even hybrid adoption is that they're concerned that there's not going to be a vehicle that meets their lifestyle needs. In other words, they say, well, I have a minivan and that's what I really need. Well, guess what? There's actually a minivan out there known as the Chrysler Pacifica that runs as a hybrid. Not many people know that, but it's actually a plug-in hybrid that you can charge every day, gives you about, let's say 20 to 30 miles of all electric range. And then it just kicked into a regular hybrid mode. Some of the people that are working with trucks every day, they're skittish about that perspective. Well, guess what? Ford has committed to putting out an all-electric F-150 in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I can't wait.
I think they're going to be awesome, Shelby. And there are other folks that are looking at completely new from ground up models like the Rivian. So Those are good things to
Yeah.
watch, in addition to the things like the Cybertruck. Like, not everybody needs to be
Yes.
driving a Cybertruck.
Yes. I even saw the Ford Mustang. It might be completely against all car culture to make a GT Mustang electric, but I bet you it will be ridiculously fast, like, just like the Tesla.
Yeah.
So, and this
So
is
I
actually,
appreciate, Shelby. You've got our dedicated page. I'll let you run through it, and I'm happy to fill in any gaps.
yeah, absolutely. And funny enough, I mentioned Rudy's Barbecue. This is actually a Rudy's Barbecue, the side of their parking lot here in El Paso. And I don't know this individual car, but this is a Tesla, right? You know, it's nice because you could be staying over at a hotel, which is in the background. You could be eating lunch or dinner or breakfast at Rudy's Barbecue, which are all over Texas. And you could be charging your car, which is really nice. I think you mentioned earlier, Tesla has their own dedicated network across the country, and it seems like they're constantly adding more, like ATMs all over the place.
Yeah,
So,
and the other thing I'd like to highlight here, just because we're looking at this particular photo or this image here, is that these charging stations are what's called a level 3, and in some instances, at least as of right now, they're able to output up to 150 kilowatts of energy
whew,
into the vehicle. So that's a lot. And what that means in real terms, I mean, that sounds like a great number. What that means is that in all likelihood, if you pull up to this station with a 5% battery, and you've only got, let's say, 20 miles of range. If you're driving a vehicle like this one that's shown here, this Tesla Model 3, which is maybe a long range, by the time you finish your lunch, which on average might take maybe 15 to 30 minutes, you will leave with a full battery pack. And
nice.
from that location of where that
Wow.
charging station is, you might make it all the way to eastward as far as Ozona, Texas. And I always joke that it's not the charging that's going to get you. It's probably your need for a break, for either a bathroom break or to a lunch break that you're going to have to naturally stop for anyways.
Nice. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And I think you mentioned something earlier. And I had, the friend I mentioned with the Chevy Volt, there are options where you have the first 20, 30 miles that are purely electric, but you still can have that backup four-cylinder engine with a 10-gallon tank of gas, which will get you, another, let's say, 25 to 40 miles per gallon, depending on the vehicle. So even if you ran out of gas or ran out of, sorry, your battery charge, you could still get another 200 to 400 miles out of your small electric engine that was built, or non-electric engine that was built in. So you really could have both a gasoline engine as a backup, a battery as a primary. And I know that a lot of people bought the Chevy Volt. I was really surprised when they recently said they're no longer going to make them. But you can actually find them at a really cheap price. So if you do want one, they're great cars. They're like tanks. They're very safe. So, well, cool. Well, I think that's about all we had today. Really, we just wanted to educate the public on electric vehicles, that they're not just for rich people, right? They don't just go 5 miles. They're affordable. There's many used options, even brand new options that are affordable. And also, there's a huge network here. El Paso Electric has a great rate. They're extremely behind the electric vehicle movement. Obviously, if we can get away from fossil fuels and gasoline, electric, and non-electric engines, it's going to help with health, clean air, clean water, everything that we want in this city. And so we just want everyone to know that there are lots of options for electric vehicles. Eco El Paso wants to be the education resource. El Paso Electric is happy to assist you if you need charging at home or your business. And yeah, join us the rest of the week. We're going to have speakers on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Again, they will be EV owners who live the life. But thank you, Jonathan, for joining us. Thank you to our viewers. And if you have any questions, you can always email us. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Shelby. You have a good one.
You too. Take care.